Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. Um, I think one way to sort of hopefully simplify what I'm inviting people to explore, and a kind of way maybe you could say to reorient to what's going on here, our ordinary orientation, um, what we just sort of, you could say, grown up doing as humans, is to focus on focus on what's appearing and all the ways that what's appearing is different. And of course, that's based on the way in which the mind and language is conceptualizing all of this and labeling it, categorizing it, and defining it, which is wonderful. And there's not anything wrong with that. But as part of that orientation, what we have a tendency to do, we all know this quite well, is we tend to sort of favor or privilege certain states of mind, certain experiences, certain circumstances, tending to equate certain moments with whatever it is we're wanting more of in our life, like happiness or joy, or if it's in a spiritual context, spiritual freedom or liberation. And then we associate certain aspects of what's happening, what's appearing experientially with that. And then other aspects we sort of, well, that's definitely evidence that whatever it is I'm looking for is absent. So we're in this sort of almost constant state of kind of assessing where we're at relative to how we're describing all of this. And of course, everything that's appearing is, there's no stability in it. It's constantly, we have states that we would describe as pleasurable, and they come and then they disappear, and states that are more difficult and painful, and they come and they disappear. And we're often trying to grab hold of more of the ones that we like, that are, we would say, are pleasurable, and try to have less of the ones that we would label as unpleasant. Of course, I mean, that's natural, nothing wrong with that. But we have another opportunity, another option as far as how we orient to things. And that is to make this subtle yet powerful shift from orienting to what we imagine is here descriptively, orienting to the definitions and descriptions, to, we could say, orienting to, if you like, into a film, to what's playing on the screen of life, what's appearing here, and shifting the orientation to the sheer fact that it is appearing. And this is, it may seem like, well, what's the big deal of that? But it's really the most powerful shift of orientation we could ever make. I'll guide you in a moment in just a little sort of meditative inquiry where we can sort of feature the fact that this is appearing, that this is here, and not worry too much about what it is that's appearing. Not emphasize that to the degree we tend to emphasize it. I just want to show you a GIF that I think I've mentioned before in past Zoom meetings, but I found the GIF and I wanted to share with you. There's something about it that I find to be quite evocative of what I'm talking about. And find this here. No, that's not it. 1 second. I can figure out my technical prowess here. Here we are. Okay, that's what I was looking for. There it is. So if you imagine all of the constant comings and goings of experience, this is what's appearing. This is the movie of life showing up in every instant. The movie of us, because we're part of the projection of life, the shining forth of this reality. And the shift that I'm talking about, the reorientation, is to just go back to the sheer fact that this is appearing, that this is shining forth, that this is being, that the projector is on somehow. Because that's the constant. That's what doesn't come and go. It's the constancy of the experiencing itself. The experiences, they're constantly changing, aren't they? And all the ways that we describe them, all the seeming differentiation. And yet the experiencing itself is this constancy, this hum, the hum of life that is not coming and going. It doesn't come and go. And yet it's appearing as everything that's coming and going, that's arising and passing away and arising and passing away. So just let yourself feel that for a moment as we just sit here together. Just for now, it doesn't matter at all what's appearing. It doesn't matter. Just let it not matter at all what's being experienced and the way you might be describing it, what's showing up experientially, what's appearing. You can enjoy whatever's appearing, but don't let it be whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is right now. What matters is the fact that the appearance is here, and appreciate the way in which what's here is constantly changing. But feel the constancy of the appearing, the constancy of experiencing itself, the hum of life, of existence, this vitality shining forth. The shining forth is constant, isn't it? Just feel that. And feel the way in which what you think of as yourself is just another part of the shining forth of reality. That light that's streaming forth like this projector is streaming forth as you. You are a projection. We are projections of this life, emanations of this mysterious, miraculous reality. And everything is. Everything is a projection of this, an apparition of, there's no way to explain any of that, of course. How anything is coming about is inexplicable. How this moment is just here like this, just immediately present, this emanation, this blazing projection, this appearance. And no matter if the experience is something we might say is unsettling or blissful or confusing, or it doesn't matter how it's being described. It doesn't matter what's showing up on the screen. Just allow yourself to appreciate the fact that there is anything showing up. You see, no matter where we may go in the field of experience, no matter what might be occurring, from this perspective, it doesn't matter. What matters is the fact of the appearing, not how it looks. Because the appearing itself, the shining forth, is unconditioned by how it looks. It doesn't change the fact that the light is pouring forth and emanating this apparition we call experience. Whether what's showing up on the screen is an absolute horrific scene or the most pristinely beautiful, exquisite, that we might describe a scene in that way. What is common to that is the light itself, the light of reality, the light of existence, the aliveness itself. That and it's absolutely impossible to ever be apart from this, because this is all that actually exists, is the shining forth. And the recognition of this constancy of experiencing itself, the constancy of this shining forth, of this emanation, and that no experience has an independent existence apart from the shining forth. It is the shining forth. And from that vantage, it doesn't matter what's being experienced. Literally, it does not matter, because no experience that you might have can take you closer towards this light or further away from it, because what's appearing experientially is none other than the light. So a moment of great sadness is an emanation of the light, just as a moment we would describe as great joy. They're different from the perspective of the description and how they look. Obviously, they're distinct from that, on that side of the coin. But from this other side of the coin, they're not distinct or the same thing. This inexplicable shining forth. So we don't actually have to do something to get ourselves into a particular configuration or state, or have the right set of circumstances in place in order for this light to be present, because this light is ever present as all things, as every instant, as everything. So there's never any departure from it, nor is there any returning to it either. It may feel like a kind of returning to a sort of sanity when we recognize what we're orienting ourselves to right now. Because in a very, very real sense, it feels like home. It's the home that can't go away. It's the home that is the very basis of every state of mind, every experience, every circumstance. And this reorienting to the shining forth itself, rather than how the shining forth is appearing, and emphasizing that, oh, well, it looks really nice, I like it that way when it shines like that, which it's fine to do that, of course, but that's that tendency to emphasize the descriptions, as I was saying, is the very thing that creates the sense of lack and problem and something's missing and all those sorts of things, which set us out on the journey to try to find wholeness and completeness and fill the void that we imagine is there. But there is no void. There's not anything missing, because the shining forth, as I was saying, permeates all that is appearing. Just as the images on the screen are inseparable from the projector's light, they're the same one and the same thing. And the recognition of that, the kind of reorientation to the light itself, to the presence of constancy of experiencing itself, functions to kind of undercut this tendency we have, this habit we have of favoring one aspect over another, of imagining some aspects are problems and some are not problems, this tendency we have to privilege certain experiences over others. Well, that was a better one. That's a more meaningful one. No, every experience is equally meaningful. Every experience is equally actually beautiful from this other vantage, even the ones we would describe as painful and difficult. And this is what the Tibetans speak of when they talk about the great perfection of everything. This is the great perfection of everything. But from the level of describing it where we divide it up as, right, this is different from that, this is distinct from that, it's very difficult to sort of get that, what is common to all experience, this great perfection, this great beauty, this transcendental miraculousness. Well, that's probably a nice launching point for any thing that you folks might like to explore or share. Love to hear from anyone.
So two things came up for me.
Mm-hmm.
The saying "life goes on" came up for me when
Mm-hmm.
I was just like watching,
Mm-hmm.
watching that reel go.
Mm-hmm.
And also I thought about how when we watch a movie, there's always the very climactic parts of the movies that people kind of remember, but
Mm-hmm.
that all those smaller scenes are equally important. Like we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't watch a movie that was just showing the big scenes. You still need all those small scenes in between.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one thing, I'm just looking at Pam's chat since I think her audio is broken. um, yeah, Pam said in the chat, it's like seeing, it's like the seeing itself is primary and what is second, seen is secondary. Right, and ultimately they're one and the same thing. Just like the images on the screen are none other than the light that's shining forth. So there's no separation. There are two sides of the same coin. They're a single thing. In fact, the seeing is known by what's seen, actually. The light is known by the images it reveals. But the images are always coming and going. It's the light that's the stability and the constancy, actually, that we're looking for. It's a funny thing because we're looking for stability in what's not stable. We're looking for security in what's completely not secure. We're looking for certainty in what is wholly uncertain, all the appearances, because they have no duration. They're impermanent. They're just slipping away every instant. But you can feel the constancy. It's like I'm thinking about this. I'm a musician. I was thinking about it as it's like the hum of reality. It's just always humming along. But it's always singing a different song. That's what's being seen, is what's the particular melody that's playing. But the hum, the sound, the sounding of reality is constant. It's always sounding. And it always sounds different. And yet the sounding is what's constant. That's the constancy. And this is not an abstraction, by the way. Like if you just feel the presence of your own being right here, the presence of what's here, that's it. That is the light that's shining forth. It's not abstract. It's the most non-abstract thing possible. It's this instant that you can feel the presence of existence. No matter how it's appearing, that the presence is constant, isn't it? Where would it ever go? I mean, if you had a moment where you felt like the presence slipped away, that's what would be present. That's what I mean. It doesn't slip away. It just always looks different. It's never holding still. Why does that get overlooked and taken for granted? I think you'll have to ask, you'll have to ask God. In the sense of you have to ask not to make it theological for those who may not be so inclined, but you have to ask whatever is doing all of this, whatever is doing the shining forth, because it's also what misses itself, seemingly. It's also what seems to overlook itself. The very force of life that's producing all of this appearance, all of this experiencing, is also the same force of life that interprets and imagines ourselves as separate and imagines ourselves as lacking. So it's kind of like that's its, what they say in the Hindu tradition, that's its Leela, its play. Its play is to play hide and go seek with itself, to miss itself. Oh, where did I go? I lost myself. I can't find myself. And meanwhile, it's like you are yourself. You can't get away, I remember the first time that I saw this, many, many years ago. It just absolutely blew my socks off because it was just such a mind blower to realize that I'd been running around looking for myself and I was myself. I mean, it's funny, but that, and I suddenly remembered all these kind of mystical poets of the beloved playing hide and go seek with herself, and sort of being coy with herself, the way Rumi and Hafiz and these poets would write. It's like, what were they talking about? And I understood. It was like this sense of here I am up. And then you have this feeling, oh, I forgot it. And it's like, when it gets really interesting though, is when you start to realize that the experience of seemingly having overlooked this, like you're saying, Pam, seemingly missed it, is also it. And then you realize there's never any missing it. In the beginning or earlier on in this process of sort of inquiry and reorienting towards the shining forth itself rather than what it is that's showing up, it can feel as if there's a kind of a recognition of that and then a kind of losing sight of that and going back to all the descriptions, and it can feel that way, and it's fine if that's how it's feeling, and it feels as if there's a process of returning back to recognizing the constancy of experiencing itself rather than emphasizing all the descriptions and interpretations. But at a certain point, what starts to dawn is that all the descriptions and all the interpretations are the shining forth, and they're exquisite in their own right too. They're not the obstacle we imagine. What we think of as the obstacles to the divine, if you will, are none other than the divine. So there are no obstacles. There's nothing obscuring the light. Although it may seem like there is sometimes. And in a moment where, it seems like there's something obscuring the light, we would describe it like that. We're describing what's being seen in that moment. But of course, what's being seen is the evidence of the seeing. That's how we know that there's the light. The light is always revealing whatever is being revealed, always perfectly. Just like a mirror, always registering exactly what's here in perfect clarity. There's always perfect clarity. How would I describe sleep? Pam was asking in the chat. Sleeping and dreaming are just more apparition, more interesting, curious, mysterious ways that the shining forth can show up as what we describe as dreaming, sleeping, waking, right? So those are, you could say, different modes, different ways it can show up. But from the perspective of the projector that's projecting what we call waking life or projecting what we call the dream world, let's say, the dream world is the same as the waking world. The same in terms of its basic fundamental nature, it's the same. Another way to kind of think about that light that I was showing you in that GIF, the projector of the light, is to imagine that if you take all the different kind of states of mind, that whether they're dream states or waking states, different ways we could characterize it as, a moment of great sadness, a moment of anger, a moment of confusion, a moment of joy, right, a moment of insecurity, a moment of um, feeling very open and free. So one way to think about each of those experiences is that they're all the lively expressions of life. They're all the way the life energy is expressing itself. Or you could say they're all different forms of energy, different ways the energy can kind of seemingly configure itself and arrange itself in a particular way, assemble itself. But they're all fundamentally energy. Everything is life energy. Sadness is life energy. Joy is life energy. Just different ways that the life energy can express itself. When we kind of go back and reorient from the description of, there's sadness is uncomfortable, sadness is a problem, or whatever it is we imagine as a problem, we're orienting to the description that then has the implications sometimes of lack, limitation, problem, and so on. And then we return to the like primal energy of everything. The primal energy there is no problem in the energetic aspect of it. It's really only in the descriptive aspect of the energy that underlies fear and anxiety, just the energy, the pure primal energy of those states we think of as problems. Feel it as energy, feel everything as energy. In the energetic aspect of everything, there is no problem. There's just pure energy, pure, beautiful, radiant energy. Feels different, doesn't it? And that's always we can always recognize, like in a moment that we might feel like ourselves being sucked down the rabbit hole of description and problem and associated problems, and now I need to fix this problem, we can also recognize, you just feel the presence of it, feel the sheer raw presence of it, the sheer raw energy of it, and see if you don't recognize that in that recognition you're free of problem, which doesn't preclude going and addressing it at the level of the apparent problem either, like my broken motor on my automobile is an emanation of life force and energy, just as the engine that's operating really well. So I may still want to fix the engine, even though in fundamental basis it makes no difference whether the engine's running or not. It's still reality. It's still life. So we can still take care of things at the level of their descriptions to the extent that we find ourselves moved to take care of them, whether that's addressing things on an individual level or a societal level. But meanwhile, we have access to a whole nother dimension, if you will, or a whole nother sort of we have access to the freedom from all the descriptions and all the characterizations and all the seemingly problematic implications of those. Does that make sense? And you can, as a practice, if you're inclined to take it up as a kind of practice, you can just they do say in the Tibetan tradition, you can take short moments of just recognizing the hum of being, the hum of existence, the shining forth. It's always shining forth. And at a certain point, then you realize that whether you're quote unquote taking time to recognize that or not, that's exactly that's the only thing that's ever occurring. But it's in it's the difference of recognizing it or not recognizing it, I would say, is that, for example, if you take a moment right now to just recognize, just feel the presence of your own life force, your own being, which is the beingness of everything, actually. You just feel the presence of that. Then you get to partake of you get to partake of it. You get to enjoy it. You get to appreciate it. It's always the case, but it's sort of like light is always here and color is always here. When you recognize that that's the case, that it's always here, you get to appreciate it. It's kind of similar. It's like when you recognize this constancy of being, this constancy of presence, you get to enjoy it. And it is very enjoyable. It's the enjoyment that doesn't go away, no matter what's happening. I call it like another order of well-being. It's like there's the usual well-being we think of as opposed to the lack of well-being. Like, oh, sometimes I feel well, sometimes I don't feel well. Sometimes I feel happy, sometimes I don't feel happy. That's ordinary human mode. What I'm talking about is another mode. It's the mode of, it's not really a mode, it's more like beingness itself. Our being, which is not our being, is the presence of experiencing itself, which is boundless. Actually, there's no, it doesn't end somewhere at some supposed skin line. It's the beingness of the field, the full field of your experience. The presence of this is a well-being that doesn't come and go. It doesn't come and go. It doesn't disappear. It may not be recognized always, but it doesn't disappear just because it's not being recognized. And that's accessible just simply by feeling the presence of what's here. Just feel the presence of what's here. There's the description of it. Oh, I feel good, I feel relaxed, or I feel tense, or I feel anxious, or agitated, or calm, or whatever the description is. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the sheer presence of it, the sheer existence of it. Just like I was showing here. That's the sheer presence of it. That light. That light that's shining. This is the light show. We're seeing the light show, aren't we? It's all a light show. Sometimes the light show looks like a shit show. Right? Coronavirus, pandemic, civil unrest. Even in all of that, we're really, I mean, the twisted nature of that is we're emphasizing only what's a tiny part of even the light show that's going on planet Earth right now. Because there's so much that's going on that's not defined by all that stuff that we think of as the shit show. But meanwhile, whatever is happening, whether it's a moment of harmony or disharmony, the light is shining. The light shines as the moments we call harmony and the moments we call disharmony. They're all the shining forth. They're all what's showing up on the screen. They're all what's appearing in ways that can't be explained. I mean, here's this appearance. Feel the power of this appearance. It's like the energy of it is just unbelievable. It's like it's the energy of the universe is appearing as this appearance. And the appearance slips away, and then a new appearance arises, and it slips away, and a new one. But meanwhile, that energy, the constancy of that energy it's like as full can be, as whole can be, as complete can be. Nothing missing, nothing absent. And that fullness can't be taken away. Sorry, Pam, I didn't see your question. When you say access to the freedom, are you implying free will? Well, if your audio was working, I would ask you about that question, but I can't do that, or I'm not going to do it. Yeah, it's not working for some reason. I'm sorry. I'm sure that's frustrating. Um, I'll try to see if I can guess what you're asking. Um, in a certain way, the whole question of free will and determinism, like, can I make a choice, or is this just happening, like, choicelessly? In a way, it's like understandable we grapple with that question as humans, certainly because we have a sort of the conventional view, of course, is that we do have agency and free will. Like, I can choose to pick up the glass and drink the water, right? I'm free to do that. But even if I wasn't free to do it, like, in some sense, like it was just being done by the universe, which of course it is being done by the universe, because even the ability to pick up the glass, let's say, requires energy, right? The body has to have energy to pick up the glass. Where's the energy coming from to pick this up? It's coming from the projector. So all of it is being, in that sense, is like, I'm not responsible. I can't say that I'm ultimately doing this. The universe is picking this glass up. All the forces of the universe are picking this glass up. But even if that's the case, even if I say, like sometimes spiritual teachings will say as a kind of way of countering the conventional view that we're free agents, which also tends to make us feel like we're separate from the universe, we're separate from divinity, and so on. That even if there's no actual free agency, there's no separate person who has freedom, because what you are is the universe. So you're not really a separate individual. Even if that were true, I can still pick up the glass. So it doesn't really matter. That's what I mean by it's kind of a moot point. Who cares? I may not be able to say that I'm the one I don't know how to get up and walk across the room. I have no idea how to do that. I really don't. Like, I don't know how that's even possible to get up. I mean, how come I'm not falling over right now? How come I'm just not succumbing to gravity? I'm able to sit upright. I have no idea why, but I can still sit up upright, even though I don't know how. So in that sense, even if you don't have free will or agency, you can still notice the ever-present flow of experiencing, the light that's shining forth. You can still notice that. It would appear that we have that capacity to do that. Does that make sense? Yeah. I was saying this earlier, what's so wonderfully powerful and empowering about that shining forth, the energy of creation, creating each instant, is that it's palpably here. It's palpably here as our very experience. It's not an abstraction. feel whatever is being felt right now, think whatever is being thought, sense whatever is being sensed, remember whatever is being remembered, imagine whatever you're imagining. All of that is the very presence of that. So you don't have to go anywhere. It's not some abstract thing. It's just your current perception, your current experience, just as it is. That is the light shining forth. And that makes it very simple. It's not some other moment, it's this moment. This is the only moment that ever exists anyway. There's no other moment. There will never be another moment. There never has been another moment, except as an abstraction. I think arguably if there's an obstacle to kind of recognizing what I'm describing, trying to describe, difficult as that is the imagining that it looks a certain way, that it feels a certain way. And that's the idea that the grass is greener somewhere else, you know? Like, no, it's not this, it's something else. Something better than this, something more enlightened than this, something wiser than this, something more awake than this, something whatever, on and on and on. Like, actually, it's this, just as it is. This is what God looks like, just like this. After all, what else could this possibly be? So every experience is the same doorway, basically, into infinity, the same doorway into divinity, the same doorway into the ever-present shining forth, right? It's like, could go back to the analogy of the movie projector. It's like, oh yeah, those characters that look this way, and I kind of like how those characters are acting, like, and then that's what I want it to look like. That's what I want the light to look like. And then those characters I don't care for as much. No, put them over here. No, they're all of the characters. They are all the emanations of light. Even Donald Trump. You made the like Donald Trump, so I don't mean to pick on Donald Trump, but he's one that many people don't care for, needless to say. Um, but no, it's again, from the level of description, you know, to use the two US political candidates, Donald Trump is not Joe Biden. They're different characters, right? They see the world differently. They have different histories, right? Obviously. But what are they fundamentally? What's Donald Trump made of fundamentally? Despite whatever character traits of his you don't care for, possibly, or Joe Biden for that matter. What are they made of fundamentally? Well, they're made of the same thing you and I are made of. They're made of the mystery. They're made of the light. They're emanations. What else could they possibly be? I mean, even look at it from a physics standpoint, the body mind that you call Trump, or the body mind you call Biden, or the body mind you call yourself. From a physics standpoint, well, what is that body mind made of? Let's go purely physicalistic here, purely materialistic. Okay, I'm just a swirling array of chemicals and molecules and neurons and cells, and which are, of course, a swirling array of atoms and electrons, and which are themselves an array, a swirling dance of subatomic, inconceivable quarks and quantum probability fields. And I mean, what are we actually? Even at the level of matter, we're pure mystical creatures. It's astonishing. It looks from one perspective like this solid body, and it is that, and it isn't that at the same time. It's like a cloud of unknowing, as the famous book says, of unknowability, of mystery, of pure mystery. That's a paradox, It seems like we know what we are, our personality, our bodies, our minds, other bodies, other minds, other personalities, circumstances, the whole thing. Like we feel as if we know what these things are, like we can recognize the appearance, but what is it? What is it really? What is it that's appearing? Feel that. What is this body? This thing you call a body? Feel it. Feel the presence of it. You won't be able to find it, which is a really trippy thing. It's here and you can't find what it is. You can't find where it's located. You can't find what it's made of. It's mirage-like. Everything is mirage-like. And yet, at the same time, definitely, it's definitely here. Like I can feel it. But even if I feel like touch, the sensation of touch, it's like very concretely present. If I just feel the sensation of touch, I mean, just put your hand on your body, feel the the sensation of touch. And what is that? Feel the sensation. Don't assume that you know what it is. Don't even call it a sensation. Just feel what's there. It's this crackling, sparkling, electric. I don't know what it is. Crazy, huh? Maybe that's why Socrates at the end of his life apparently said, "The only thing I know is that I know nothing." That's what Socrates said. The great philosopher. I have a feeling he might have been seeing what I'm talking about. Like no matter how hard he looked as a philosopher, he couldn't get to the bottom of what this was. Maybe that's because there is no bottom. I mean, if it's an infinite universe, then of course there is no bottom. You never get to the final conclusion of what it is because it's infinite. That's what we are. We are the infinite. So that's the curious thing, it's like, there's an iPhone, right? Joe, you're looking at an iPhone. But this is an interface point like everything else is. You're looking at infinity, not just an iPhone. Literally. This is what one way infinity can look. And it can look like this, like a book, or it can look like everything. It looks like everything. So one doorway into what I'm talking about, if it sounds abstract at all, is again to just feel the energy of what's present, right? The energy of your experience, no matter how the energy is configured and how you might be describing it, feel it more primally, feel the sheer presence of this energy that's showing up as the sound of my voice, or showing up as your feelings or your sensations or your thoughts, and just feel the primal energy. It's what's common about everything is this energy. The energy can, it's like ice cream. It can sometimes be chocolate, sometimes it can be vanilla, sometimes it can be strawberry, but it's still ice cream. The energy can sometimes show up as joy, sometimes as sorrow. It's still energy, it's still life force. It's still that light from the projector. The light that's making this moment, that's appearing as this moment. And just feel that. Feel the presence of energy, the presence of life. And right there, you're dropped into the unknown. You're dropped into the mystery, wholly, completely, free falling through the mystery. And this is always true. It's never not true. It's never not the case. So our descriptions make us, we imagine that we have a handle on what things are because we can seemingly describe them. Oh, I know what that is. That's, and I give it a name. Whether it's an object like an iPhone or a subjective experience like sadness or joy, I have a name for it. I've just characterized it. It's like a pattern. I see the pattern. I recognize it. Well, consciousness sees it like just like that. It knows what it is, recognizes it. But the invitation here is just for a moment, just look a little more closely. Don't assume that you know what things are simply because you have names for them, because you can discover that you don't know what they are, even though you have names for them, which is peculiar because it seems like I know what it is. It's joy, it's sorrow. So it's like I know what they are. I know what these things are. I have a name for them. And I know that joy is not the same as sorrow. But then when I go to look for joy, in the same way that I go to look for the rainbow or the mirage in the desert, I come up empty handed. I can't get to the bottom of what joy is as an energy, as a presence, as a light. It's inconceivability is what it is. And that's pure freedom. It's pure freedom from all the descriptions, all the identities. You're free of all your identities in every instant. You're completely free of all of them. And you're free to have them at the same time. So it's a win-win. You get to have your cake and eat it too. You can be a person, I can be John Astin, and I can recognize that no such thing exists, that I'm pure mystery. I'm pure unfathomable infinity, showing up as what I might call John Astin. So it's very paradoxical. In that indescribability and inconceivability, there is a sanity, there is a clarity. I don't know if you have a sense of it as I talk about it, but it's just this pure, pristine, natural perfection. Pure neutrality, equanimity, openness. It's not grabbing hold of things, it's not pushing them away, it's just being everything. There's nothing to grab hold of, it's just reality just being itself. So it's yeah. Reality is just being you in all the different ways that you are. Astonishing. I was looking back this morning, I was looking through the very first book I ever wrote about this stuff called Too Intimate for Words, which is primarily, well, it's about half of the book is poetry and then little kind of prose meditations or reflections. Maybe I'll read a couple of passages because this is what I was just speaking about. This is called It's Still Happening. The miracle that is creation, the miracle that gave rise to you and me, it's still happening. It's taking place right now. This mystery of nothing becoming something, this awesome explosion of life that continues to miraculously emerge, moment by moment. From where does this existence arise? From where do we come? Where is the source out of which every breath and thought springs forth? That moment in which creation took birth is not merely back in some distant past. It's present right now, in this very moment. God taking birth as you, right now, and now, and now. You are the Big Bang that's still happening. Isn't that cool?
Sean, good morning.
Hey,
Can you hear
Michael.
me? Hi, great
Hi.
to hear you.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you.
Such a beautiful space. This is a more relative concern, but I'll just bring it up briefly.
Mm-hmm.
And any any advice that you wanted to offer would be appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm finding. I mean, this year, 2020 has been just a real difficult time for just about everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some friends and this year people have just moved on. I've lost friends this year. People I mean, they weren't really strong friendships, and
Hmm.
now they're gone.
Hmm.
And one friend from for many years, but he moved away. But we stayed in touch every once in a while, and it brings to mind a greater question. I guess the question of just being eh, completely true to one's own convictions or one's own experience.
Hmm.
So with this friend, very bright guy, had been a geology professor, became a flight instructor at the Watsonville Airport. That's how I knew him because I used to be a private pilot, and I did some aircraft checkouts with him.
Hmm.
And and he was raised Catholic. He walked away from it. He was interested in Taoism. He said he was about to go to Nepal to study Tibetan Buddhism.
Hmm.
Well, long story short, he became a born again Christian when he was
Hmm.
living up in Seattle area,
Hmm.
and that was in the late '90s. So, and I, this he was always somebody that I deeply respected. Really good heart. When I was flying, he offered his time for free. He even offered to uh, give me free flight instruction so I could get my commercial license, which I never did. But just a heart of gold.
Hmm.
And so I found whenever I was after he became a Christian, I didn't want to offend him, and I found myself stretching to accommodate
Hmm.
what he believes, so as not to offend him.
Hmm.
And I know I do that with other people too,
Hmm.
because it's coming out of my need, my desire to be accepted, to be seen
Sure.
favorably in the eyes of others.
Hmm.
And I'm at a point now, and then sometimes I would swing in the other direction, not so much with him,
Hmm.
although a few times with this guy. His name is Steve,
Hmm.
but I'd become, uh, I'd express, um, I'd sort of enjoy being a contrarian, saying, you know, this is one view, but there's
Hmm.
other ways of seeing it.
Hmm.
So I would sort of rebel
Hmm.
against that, or I would just be
Hmm.
overly accepting.
Right.
And I'm finding I don't. Those are two extremes. I don't want to challenge anybody, but at the same time, I don't want to have to feel
Hmm.
I have to uh,
Right.
accept something that I don't believe just to please
Right.
them or to be okay in their eyes.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
a lot of this functions, and some of it's very overt and very obvious. Some of it's
Hmm.
very very subtle.
Hmm.
Just you know, the basic dynamics of how we relate to others, how others
Sure.
see us, so if you anything that you could share, you have a lot of wisdom, I'm sure, on that, having been in psychology and just having lived for
Hmm.
59 or 60 years. So please,
Hmm.
any
Hmm.
feedback would be appreciated.
I think that there's a very subtle, it's a kind of a subtle dance that we do, with others in a way, where we're meeting them, it's like two, you could think of it as two sort of energy patterns, two
Mm-hmm.
galaxies meeting one another, and this is one way to look at it, and then it's a kind of a dance of like, how do I move with this other energy? How do I find my way, if you're inclined to? I mean, sometimes you just might meet the energy and just say, I'm not really inclined to dance with this energy, and that could be with
Mm-hmm.
an old friend or someone you just meet, right, where you just say, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, there's not a movement to interact with a person. But if there is a
Mm-hmm.
movement, say in the case of the friend who became Christian, and there's still an impulse in you to be connected, um, if if that impulse is there, then you just have to kind of find that sweet spot as much as you're able to, between sort of being true to your own song, the song that rings true to you, of your own experience and how you experience and see the world. Think of that as your song, and then that person singing their song. And it's like an art form, right? To both sort of not lose yourself in their song, not sacrifice who you are in order to make the dance work, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, at the same time, there can be a kind of like um, there can be a kind of adjusting of oneself to match the energy of the other in some way, to hear where they, to kind of go to where, to kind of almost enter into their galaxy in a sense, enter into their world such that there can be more of a sense of resonance and harmony. I mean, this stuff is very subtle. I'm just kind of speaking words that may not make sense, um, but I just think I don't think there's like a hard and fast rule around it, Michael. It's like, there's,
Right,
I
right.
think the challenge can be, and I've seen it in my own life, where at least myself, I notice a kind of chameleon-like nature that I have, where I can enter into the worlds of others, and the next thing I know, I'm almost like being like them.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can feel that way, and it's like it's a way of like, I think I'm kind of like a harmonizer by nature a bit, and so I'm like, and the trick can be like to be very clear for myself as much as I can be, like I may be doing that and I'm finding that enjoyable, it's like that's part of my own enjoyment, that's why I'm doing it, but I want to make sure that I'm also not potentially sacrificing something maybe that I might value more, and I may be sort of like, um does that make sense, where
it
yeah.
does. As you're speaking,
Hmm.
it's sort of clarifying a little bit in my mind that you get very specific.
Hmm.
So as you know, I mean, I just absolutely love more than anything
Hmm.
the whole um, adventure or realm
Hmm.
of Dharma of the whole. I mean,
It's your
the
great passion, Michael, I
it's
know
my
that.
great passion
Yeah.
that we can go from being confused
Hmm.
and suffering
Hmm.
in so many ways to finding
Hmm.
the peace that passes all understanding, as it says in the
Hmm.
Bible. Uh, uh, um, and I mean, I've actually hung out in Christianity, and I, of course, I relate to it in a more universalist way
Hmm.
than most of my Christian friends, but nonetheless,
Hmm.
I sense that there's real spiritual power
Hmm.
there, and it's beautiful. And it has to do with
Yeah.
mercy and loving kindness,
Hmm.
and that's absolutely beautiful. And I mean, one of my Christian friends, he said, I wouldn't, and he's totally, mainstream
Hmm.
in terms of he believes that there's only one way. But he said early in our friendship, I would never judge you, I would never abandon you,
Hmm.
because of what you believe. He had been a Buddhist himself
Hmm.
before he became a Christian. But with most of my, particularly this fellow now up in Spokane, Steve, when we're speaking, I know where he's coming from. I know that he feels that I've missed the boat, in that
Sure.
he doesn't say that anymore.
Right.
But from my side, I want to say, Steve, yes, there is God. But God is much bigger than any idea about that.
Yeah.
What God is transcends any doctrine, any tradition.
Yeah.
But yes, this world is divine, and I want to share that and connect at the
Sure.
heart. But
But
I know that
you may not be able to ultimately,
right,
and
but
that's the question for you, like in a case like that where you guys don't quite meet up, and a
and
part of you wishes that you could meet up.
yeah, and
um
a part of me wishes that he would say, Mike, I appreciate your perspective,
mhm,
and may you continue to discover. In other
mhm,
words, I would want him to, in my heart, I would wish for his respect and his support,
Yeah.
but I know that part of him is thinking, well, yes, I want you to find peace and love and all that,
But
but
you can
you
find that
really
through
need to,
Jesus. Yeah.
yeah. So there's always this tension when I like tiptoeing on eggshells. I don't want to offend him, and yet I don't want to not share or sort of withhold my own
Right.
uh, sometimes very exuberant
Well,
confidence.
that's what I mean by being true to your song, Michael. And I mean, at a certain point, it's like, I think that if you feel, if we find in certain relationships that it's somehow, there's this sense of we can't sort of be all of ourselves, that there's not an openness to that, then it's possible that we might move away from those relationships, that we might,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
sometimes, and when, if and when that occurs, then we experience whatever sense of loss that we experience from that. Then in other relationships, I got to play golf, and I play golf with my golf buddies, and it's not necessarily like the stuff we're exploring here is not what tends to come up in our conversations. We're,
yeah,
we're very infrequently.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and but I just enjoy, I think I just enjoy it for what it is, and
yeah, yeah.
it's sort of like,
Just
and this is one of the major fringe benefits of tuning into the radiance, that's projecting all of this, you could say, the radiating force of existence, that's always the case, no matter how it's showing up, is that whether it's showing up, like I would say, I if you put me up against the wall and said, which kind of conversations do you prefer? There's definitely a part of me that prefers these kinds of conversations. And yet I also prefer just talking about, like, oh, that shot I just made on the golf course too. So I enjoy that as well. But there's a
yeah,
way in which, like, having access to the ever-present presence that that we are and everything is, that somehow seems to result in a kind of capacity to enjoy more and more and more of it, more and more of the full diversity of it, and all the different forms it can take. So I can watch a stupid show on TV and just, it's not somehow antithetical to a conversation like this. It's just another way the radiance can show up, and
I get specifically
mhm,
in this. Because I know I agree, and
mhm.
just appreciate
You
the
appreciate it for what it
amazing,
is. Yeah. The
yeah,
amazing, yeah.
wonderful diversity
Exactly. And
of
and the
how
and the
people get.
miraculous nature of your connection, and you enjoy the connection for what it is. I mean, it's like this often happens to people, with like family members, where they may not have chosen their family members to be the ones that they're going to be close with, as you might your close friends, right? Where there's this clear resonance and you come together with your friends or your partners because of that resonance. You're born into whatever families you're born into, and there may or may
Yeah,
not
yeah,
be, there might be incredible discord even. And to
yeah.
whatever extent one feels themselves moved to continue with those relationships, say family relationships, then you
Yeah,
do that. You learn to dance as skillfully and artfully and joyfully as you can with the fullness of all of our experience. And sometimes it can lead to, like, hey, this connection with this person no longer feels resonant for me, and for whatever reasons, and then you might choose to limit the contact with that person, and that just becomes
yeah,
one solution to it,
yeah,
potentially.
yeah. I think what you're pointing to right now is what I call the basis of connection. Like
Hmm.
like a, in my case, of flying buddy, or for
Hmm.
you, a golf buddy,
Right.
and you're not going to necessarily bare your soul with that person, or to get
Right.
into really deep things. You can just sort of enjoy life together in the
Right.
moment. It just what in this particular case,
Hmm.
because he was he was somebody who was very kind to me. I looked upon him as a real mensch, in Yiddish, a
Hmm.
gentleman, a kind person, and almost like a big brother, even though he's slightly younger than I am.
Hmm.
And so just that dynamic of wanting to be accepted and respected, and then just knowing though that I'm not cutting the mustard, because I don't, from his point of view, I haven't embraced the true
Hmm.
path. So it's basically a pain body issue where I
Hmm.
feel that I'm not uh, I feel the tinge of rejection, or like I'm
Right.
not, because I'm not towing the line from his point of view. I'm not acceptable, and then part of me resents that. Like, why are you laying the ship on me? Why don't you just? Well, why do you have to uh, judge me based on what I believe?
Hmm.
And that's where my like inner Krishnamurti begins to really sort of manifest.
Right.
Like, well,
Well, another alternative that's more relevant to our discussion here would be that you have an opportunity, as we always have an opportunity in the midst of any experience, any circumstance, to return to the sort of deeper reality of what's there, the basic state of it, the fundamental nature of the encounter with that person that you could be describing in all the ways that you have been, of some discord, some sense of um, not being seen, not being appreciated, and all of that. That's all not to bypass any of that, but in another sense, there's an opportunity to bypass it and go to the heart of the matter. That is the presence of reality itself, the presence of that constancy of that light, right? That's shining
mm-hmm,
forth as that's shining, something shining forth as that entire relationship and circumstance, just as it's shining forth as our encounter right now. And from the standpoint of that which is shining forth, the light of reality, there is no difference between the two. And
mm-hmm,
and the beauty of that, and why it's really, I was thinking about your question last week about bypassing, if it was last week, because it occurred to me that it was something I wanted to say, so now I have an opportunity to say it. And that is that the beauty of that radiating light and returning to that primal, right, the primal ever-present presence of presence
mm-hmm,
that's shining forth as everything, is that it does not exclude anything. It's inclusive of the fullness of the experience, of the circumstance, of whatever heartbreak is there, whatever sense of discord is there, anything that's there, that presence is. So in that sense, returning to the basis of what's here cannot be a bypass because of its all-inclusive nature. Not when we're really, if we're imagining it's something separate from what's appearing, then it can be a bypass. But when we recognize that it is what's appearing, how can there be a bypass? It's the full embrace of the totality of all of our experience. There is no bypassing in that. That's the real presence. The other presence that could be a bypass is some imagined special state that's somehow separate from all the craziness of life. That's not the presence I'm talking about. I'm talking about the presence that's shining forth as all of this. And and so that's a way to in the midst of, say, that relationship that you're describing, to just remember the basis of it. Remember, just feel the pure primal energy of all of your experience, of the circumstance
mm-hmm.
itself, of him, of you. It's like what's actually there more primally, and feel that. Now that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything about what the future of the relationship might be. That's to be determined by the dance that the two of you will do. And there's no,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and I wouldn't begin to say what should be done because I couldn't possibly
mm-hmm.
know.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, so I don't know if that's helpful at all, but um,
Yeah, no, what you're sharing supports my own.
mhm,
Um, I already left him a message, uh, saying that I totally respect you. I appreciate. He's been very, very, very kind to me for many years, and at the same time, I said I have for a long time my own convictions, my own take on the spiritual side of things,
mhm,
and that's just where I'm coming from. And I muddled my way through explaining what I shared with you earlier, that there's always this tension, but I made it very clear that I respect where he's coming from, but I don't necessarily share, let's say, the more, say, um, you know, like exclusive aspects.
right, Well, remember, you can always share your perspective non-verbally too, just by your own presence, by your own
Yeah, that's
by
the
your own
best way.
recognition, so you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
and that's transmitted. If you want to
mhm,
tell him that God's not some special separate thing separate from us, but that God is everything, for example, like you'd like to convey that, let's say, just convey it by your own realization, by your own recognition that everything about all of it is none other than pure divinity.
yeah, yeah. And
And
actually, the
that can be more powerful. That silent transmission of your own being,
absolutely,
it can be very
absolutely.
potent.
That's right. I actually finding that now I think the less I say, the better off I am. Unless something is really
Hmm.
called for to say. So,
I've definitely noticed
um,
myself over the last several years in particular, like less of an impulse in me to try to convince anybody of
right,
anything.
right,
That if somebody's
right,
interested in this perspective, then I'm like, okay, let's go. but if
right,
but the I have enough of a zealot in me, or did, that I used to try to like, but can't you see? It's so amazing, like I would get
right,
too
right.
excited about it. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I'll just get carried away, but I do with my grad students. But I kind of have an invitation there with them. It's like I'm on to share a perspective with them. They've, in a sense, at least implicitly ask for my perspective because they're taking my class. So some of them may not be interested ultimately in what I'm saying, but um, yeah. But anyway, thank you for the question. And it's something we can all relate to, in the sense of like that dance of like, how do we be true to our own, to what we are, and not lose ourselves completely in the other, in that dance. And at the same time, it's a very interesting dance that we do with other people, I think. And I'm curious about it in myself. I have been for some time, like how that, like, I sometimes even wonder, like sometimes maybe even when I enter kind of almost chameleon like into the world of others, is it apparently on the Enneagram, I'm, according to someone who's an expert, that I have a tendency to be other oriented. So I have a tendency to kind of do that, to become almost the energy of the other, or be very other oriented. But it can be
Yeah, yeah,
it can be a kind of a subtle thing where um, I might sometimes sacrifice a certain kind of, um, not ultimately, but um, because what I am can't really be lost. But in a sense, I just play with that edge sometimes around. Um, yeah, I mean, it's tricky too. Like, for example, you're talking to someone and they're completely lost in their narrative about what's going on,
mhm,
which is pretty
mhm,
common human experience. They're struggling with it. And I'm like sitting here going, and maybe they're not familiar with the kind of stuff we're discussing. I'm like sitting there going, okay, is there anything I can say here? Like, because their narrative is like misleading them severely. And there's freedom from that narrative, potentially accessible to them. Am I going to go there with them, or and I have to kind of just feel that one out, because many times I just won't say anything. I'll talk to them at the level of the narrative and about what's going on, and because that can be useful. That can be
yeah,
that can be a skillful way to be.
yeah.
But it's like, then in the midst of doing that, it's like remembering, like, yeah, but actually none of that is actually true. That whole narrative. So
Mhm.
it's it's interesting, because we have such a habit of believing all the stories and all the narratives about what's going on here. And as we've been sharing this hour and a half together, I keep inviting us into this discovery that the narratives don't ultimately hold up under scrutiny. um, so there can be this kind of toggling back and forth where you kind of are recognizing this. This is kind of, to, I think, Pam's point about seeming like we can sometimes lose touch with that, and suddenly the next thing we know, we're believing all the interpretations.
Yeah, yeah. John, I guess
Hmm.
to the extent that I can be in resting in
Mm-hmm.
the radiant presence, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever I would call it,
Mm-hmm.
and with the corresponding open-heartedness
Yeah,
that comes with that, that it's part and parcel of that.
it is part and parcel of that.
Yeah, yeah. Then I can just be as available,
Mm-hmm.
as a heart for anyone that I encounter,
Mm-hmm.
and that is truly the best way to
Mm-hmm.
approach others.
Mm-hmm.
And the final thing, I know we're at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
session. My mother, it was a rough and tumble childhood with my mom, but I talk to her at least once a week. She's a widow. Her second husband died a year ago, and but she became very conservative later in life, and she watches Fox News, and every time we speak, she tells me how great Trump is and how all these liberals are bashing him and they're so horrible,
Mm-hmm.
and on and on and on. To me, Trump doesn't seem to be qualified to be president, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't argue with her. I just listen, and but it's hard. That really, it's very, very difficult because I could just hear that she's been sort of conditioned by this
Mm-hmm.
news service, and she's accepting things that I don't believe are true.
Mm-hmm.
But she is my mother, and I wouldn't be here if she didn't raise me. So that's how I put aside my own um, reactions and just try and be there.
I understand.
John,
Thanks,
thank you,
Michael. Yeah, thanks.
thank you so much.
Lovely to hear from you, as always. All right, folks. Thanks for a lovely time. Appreciate all your being here, and yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will maybe see you down the road another time. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, John. Thank
Thanks.
you again. Bye bye.